That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of PvA Radio. I am one of your hosts, Luke Croft. Joining me, as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellowkline. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. You started, so was today the first day of your new job?
Yes, a new part-time gig that I'm doing.
Nice. And how's that going?
It's all right. It's not especially demanding. I'm doing media relations and like kind of PR work for a department at my college, Northeastern University. So it's easy work. It's not super demanding, but it gives me a little bit of bit of money that I can use every now and again.
Nice. Also joining us this week, the man responsible for turning all clocks back an hour on Sunday, Larry Hunt.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I just a hot take here. Daylight savings time ending is the worst day of the year. You get an extra hour of sleep, but then it's like I go to work in the dark, I come home in the dark. It's awful.
I'm good with it. I hate the sun, as you can tell by my skin.
It's the worst. All right.
I'll reserve worst day of the year for potentially later this week.
That's true. Get out and vote tomorrow or today or yesterday if you're listening to this on Wednesday.
See, I would remove the potentially. I always just feel like it's which foot do I want to shoot this year?
Yeah.
Oh, man. So next week I should start the show off with also joining us, anarchist Larry Hunt.
Oh, 1 foot Larry.
I'm moving further and further that way. I'm just giving up on human civilization. It can't be done.
This is PvA Radio. We get together every week, and each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article, your CAFA. Get that tattooed on your body somewhere. Then we push it out on podcast services everywhere. If you want, go ahead, drop us a follow over on twitch.tv/PvA Radio. We're going to start streaming there hopefully in the next few weeks. And also, you can find our videos on YouTube. Just search PvA Radio and we'll pop right up. So that's some housekeeping out of the way. Boys, let's go ahead and just jump into it.
All right.
What have you been playing, Larry, what have you been playing?
I played a little Overwatch this week, and it wasn't good.
Oh, my gosh. Our placements have been so bad.
Anyway, but I'm real pumped for this new character they announced this week, Ash. I think we've needed some new hit scan for a while. And you and I talked a while back, some of the things they've done with Soldier to make him, they've buffed him, but not enough. And what he needed was some kind of knockback ability, some sort of CC. And she's got hit scan, and she's got some knockback, and I'm real excited about it. She looks like an interesting addition to the bunch.
Have you seen gameplay yet?
No, just the demo reel of her abilities.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it actually in action, though.
Yeah, I haven't either. All right.
And then I've been playing the Fallout 76 beta, and I will reserve all of my words about that for a little bit later in this show.
All right, fantastic. Cody, what have you been playing?
Pretty much solely Red Dead. I've popped into Siege a couple of times this week. I'm trying to get back more into that game, but I've just been playing Red Dead. It's become a lifestyle, and I have come to the conclusion that for me it is the most expensive big budget fishing simulator. I wake up at like 8:30 every morning, turn my Xbox on, and just go fishing.
Rivaled only by Stardew Valley.
Exactly.
Yeah, I played it quite a bit this week too. Well, not this week. I got to play it a little bit over the weekend. Hold on, my cat is all tangled in my headphones. And I am going to definitively say that the movement speed is not deliberate. It's not to help you take in the little features of the world. It's just bad design. I'm saying it. I think the movement speed of Arthur is bad design. Like walking through the camp, especially, it's like, do I need to take my boots off? Are they waterlogged? Like, what is going on here? Outside of that, I am having a good time with it. I think the characters are interesting. The mission where you get drunk with Lenny is
So good.
quite possibly the best mission of any video game ever. And I think it's also that mission also kind of embodies a lot of what that game's about. It's just about living life, and it's about the innocuous times that like don't really have much impact or effect on anything outside of just the moment that you're in. And I can respect that to an extent, but I still feel like story-wise, I'm not really sure what the main line is here. Like what the story missions are. Like there's things that feel like they're bigger than other things, but at the end of the day, I just don't feel like I have a really good sense of like, this is what I'm attempting to accomplish mainly in this game.
Yeah, what I will say is that the story takes a while to take form, but once it does, I think a lot of the things you do early on in the game and that seem insignificant come together in a really interesting way. I haven't beaten the story yet. I just entered chapter 4, and I believe there are 6 chapters and then kind of there are 2 sections of an epilogue. But already, like the direction that the story is taking, I think it's set out in the beginning of the game. You're fleeing east because of something that happened, a bad job, and you're attempting to survive. Your gang is attempting to survive and stick together as you're slowly pushed east due to like worse and worse conditions, failed jobs, one after another. And I do think like it's, despite the seemingly high stakes, it's kind of just a chill Western. Like, it's very much about you just learning about these people, hanging out with them. I actually do like the pace of the camp stuff because I'm usually never in a rush to get anywhere in the camp. I'm kind of just like, I wake up from, if I took a nap and then I walk over to someone, say hi, contribute to the camp if I have money to, whatever. It's just
go fishing.
Go fishing, yes. There's a section where your camp moves, so it's right next to a lake, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't even have to move to go fishing. But yeah, I'm surprised by how surprisingly chill it is. At least for the early portions of the game, it's gotten much more intense at the point I'm in, and the setting I'm in has changed the feel of it very much. I won't spoil anything, but obviously your camp moves throughout the game. I'm still just...
And you have to find it.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
I'm really enjoying it. I'm really, really enjoying it, and I think I'm just on its wavelength. I was thinking about this, and I think a lot of it has to do with the season that I'm currently playing it in. I think if this had been released earlier this year, I might have felt differently. But I'm just like settling into fall and winter and just sort of feeling slower in general. So maybe that's why I'm connecting to it.
Yeah, I will say I've taken your advice to an extent of just like, I'm a mainline player when I get into these kind of games, and I like to just kind of follow the storyline, and then I'll come back and do some of the side stuff that interests me. But I've taken some of your advice and just kind of let things happen while I'm on the road. And if I hear somebody calling from the side of the road, I'll, go track them down and stuff. And so one of my favorite moments in that, I don't think this is it's definitely not a story thing. I don't think it's a spoiler, but I'm riding in the middle of the night, and there's this guy that's standing on the side of the road, and he's like, sir, can you help me? And I rode past him a little bit, and I come back, and, you hold down LT, and you can, like, yell out to him. So I just said that I just pressed the greet button and I went, hey, and I scared his horse, and the horse just kicked the shit out of the dude and killed him. And like, I'm like, oh shit, I got this body on my hands now, so I got to pick it up and hide it so that I don't get a bounty after me. And it was just like, I get that whole like, it's a living world thing, and those little moments like that are really entertaining. But I do feel like this game in a lot of ways tries to break itself away from the traditional like Grand Theft Auto feel that you know Rockstar's so known for. But there's so much goofiness that's still a part of it, like mechanically, and just kind of over the top things that are just like, oh, I just mowed this dude over with my horse. It was a total accident, but like now I've got to pay the price for it and get away from the cops. And it's just like they've done such a really good job of creating this realistic world where you've got to sleep and eat and brush your horse and take a bath and do all this stuff. And then there's just this over the top weirdness that happens that kind of just takes you out of it for a moment that I'm not sure how to process.
Yeah, I'm definitely still. There are moments like that are kind of they pull you out of the experience. I do think the game does a much better job of actually providing consequences to the mayhem that you create. At least a better job than GTA ever does. Like GTA, the goal for most players is to get 5 stars because they can just run train on the cops and the FBI squad because you have a rocket launcher or you can jump into a jet. The consequences, I feel like, at least in my experience, of mowing down like an entire town are definitely, I won't say they're permanent, they're longer lasting than they are in GTA. And people definitely seem to take note of, like, there's a town you get to early on called Valentine. I got into a ruckus in Valentine, not part of the story. And they definitely still remember that ruckus that I created, which is kind of cool. I like that it seems to have a memory. And then other times it totally fails. Like there was a weird like sides thing that I just discovered in a town later on in the game. There's like a window. There's an underground. There's like a basement and a window in the basement facing out to the side street. And I walked past it just because I was walking from a mission, and a guy is like, he has his hands on some bars and he's like calling out to you. He's like, "Mister, I need some help. Help me, mister." And I walked up to him, and it's this dude dressed in a baby outfit, like a birthday suit. And so I'm like, this is probably the most bizarre thing I've seen in this relatively straight-faced game so far. And so I walked up to talk to him, and it got into this whole thing where the store owner had taken him captive and was kind of holding him in this weird sexual fantasy kind of thing. And I like freed him, and I pointed a gun point blank at the store owner. I didn't kill him because he ended up being kind of pathetic and I felt bad for him. But I walked out, and then like a few hours later, I walked back into that same store, and he definitely sounded like he remembered what I did, but not 100%. Like the performance was a little off. And so there are moments like that where the memory of the game isn't exactly keeping up. And it pulls you out of it. But that's only because, at least for me, the rest of the game is so immersive that there are moments like that are few and far between that I'm able to kind of at least brush them off a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah, and so I've been playing Red Dead. That's all you've been playing, right?
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
A little bit of Siege.
Yeah.
Also played Fallout 76, but Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you because it is your topic time, and I know you want to talk in depth about Fallout 1976.
Yes, that's the name of the game. Yeah, so the more I played this beta, the more I freaking love this game, and I cannot wait to play it. And you got a chance to get in on this game with me as well, so I'm excited to have someone to talk about it with. And Cody, you can ask questions or weigh in as well, but I know you haven't played it yet. Mm-hmm. And you answered this last week. Is this a game you're interested in? I can't remember.
No, not really. It's just not for me.
Okay, fair enough. So the main thing that I really love about this game is actually the social element. I've always been a big fan of Bethesda games. I'm more of an Elder Scrolls guy than a Fallout guy. And when they announced this game, I know there are a lot of people who weren't excited about the social experience, but for me, I was pumped about it. Because with these games, you have these giant open worlds where you go on these crazy adventures and just insane stuff happens. Like the stuff you guys are just talking about with Red Dead, right? Like accidentally murdering a guy by saying hello. That's a great story. And most of the experiences you have in these worlds, like no one ever knows about. And Bethesda games are one of the few games where I like to just watch somebody play because different people are going to play those games in different ways. So I was really excited to actually get into these worlds and share them with somebody. And so Luke and I, we went on some adventures. We decided to spend a night together, a romantic evening in a cabin. We slept on some dirty mattresses on the floor.
We both got
swamp crotch, yes.
Yes.
Don't sleep on dirty mattresses on the floor, kids. That's what we learned.
At least without Gold Bond.
And swamp crotch negatively affects your agility, in case you're wondering.
But in real life as well.
Absolutely. But the social element of this game is just so unique. I've played there are all kinds of games where you've got other people and there's just constantly this hostility, and you've got games where there are clear areas where things can happen that are hostile and things can happen that are peaceful. But this game, like at any moment, people could be hostile or peaceful depending on how they're feeling. There's really no safe place. Even if they wander into your camp, they can attempt to kill you if they want to. But in spite of that, most of the people in the beta, at least, have been pretty friendly. And so it's been pretty neat. I think the game has a whole lot of potential in terms of the things that can happen community-wise. We kicked some stuff around on our Halloween episode about community events that could be done in the game. But Luke kicked around the idea of, in West Virginia, there's a celebration called Bridge Day where people just go and hang out on the New River Gorge Bridge, and some of them jump off of it if they're feeling real crazy. You could do that in the game. And so I am loving that aspect of this game more than anything else. Just the random people you can come across. You got any thoughts on the social element, Lucas?
Yeah, and it kind of ties into, I think, what you're going to talk about next, which is the story. I think it puts this game in a strange place that it's so heavily focused on co-op, but yet it still kind of clutches to a lot of the ways that Bethesda approaches quests. And that is that they're very exploration heavy. They're very text heavy. It's all about environmental storytelling and finding data logs of things that have happened in the past. And I'm with you. I really enjoy the social aspect of it, and just kind of roaming through West Virginia was really great. And the best moments of it were when it didn't have structure, where we were just kind of setting out to do our own thing. And so I'm kind of worried about what this game's going to be like when we start jumping in and there is a storyline that we want to explore. And if it's going to be one of those games where it's like, oh, we kind of play the quest side of it by ourselves to quickly level up or whatever, and then we kind of circle back up to just do some exploring, because you kind of feel like you're holding up the group if you're the guy who's like, I want to read all the logs that I found on this computer, or hey, I want to spend some time trying to hack into this computer to get into this door or whatever. There's kind of a mental clock that ticks while you're doing that if you're playing with other people, because you don't want to be the guy that's holding the experience up. So I feel like there could have been a better, maybe more Destiny-esque approach to the quests, where you have some sort of companion that's going around and reads the logs for you, or using your Pip-Boy even to put audio logs and stuff into to listen to more of, so that it doesn't interrupt the flow of the co-op gameplay. That was really my only gripe with the beta, though. getting the world's beautiful, and getting in there and exploring it and having, encountering the weird creatures that the Fallout series is known for. Like it was a lot of fun. So
yeah, and a couple weeks ago, you guys asked. There was a question about photo mode back when Spider-Man came out, and I had actually never played a game with photo mode. And as I anticipated, I love photo mode so much.
Welcome to the club.
I spend so much time setting up the perfect shot. I'm like a middle school girl on Instagram. It's amazing. And you have like filters on the photo mode in Fallout. I don't know if that's typical, but it's very Instagram-esque. And I really like it just in terms of being able to document my adventure. Every time I get off, I take the screenshots from the photo mode and tweet them out. Hey, here's what I got into tonight. Pretty interesting way to share the stories. And another thing I like about the social element is, again, just most people are peaceful, but some psycho may try to kill you at any given moment. And I really wanted to be that psycho. I still haven't managed to experience what actually happens when you get labeled a murderer, because everyone I try to murder fights back, and then it's not a murder; it's just a clean kill. But the first 5 minutes of Luke being on, this girl was cooking a meal or something, and I just started trying to murder her. And she was way lower level than me. Should have been fine. I was taking her out, but she started fighting back, and she tricked me in the most fantastic way ever. She unequipped her weapons and came at me with her fists. I was like, oh, all right, we're gonna fist fight. I'm down with that. So I unequipped my weapons, and then she equipped a machete, cut me across the face, and killed me. Incredible, well played. But Luke and I, we went to all kinds of places. We went to the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant. We actually tried to summon the Mothman, but we failed.
That's not a real place, is it?
Point Pleasant is.
No,
I don't know if there's
not
actually
the Mothman Museum though.
I don't know. It
Probably.
wouldn't surprise me. Yeah,
yeah,
they do have a giant statue of him there.
Yeah, Mothman's a big legend in West Virginia.
Interesting.
Yeah. Have you ever watched Mothman?
I have not.
Mothman Prophecies. It's a good movie. Not the sci-fi movie Mothman with Jewel State. Jewel State's great. I don't know how they got her in that movie. It's terrible. Moving on. And one thing I like about it, back in the day, Bethesda would have like areas of their games where if you could wander into an area where everything was way above your level and you would just get wrecked. And more recently, it's kind of been like the enemy's level dependent on your level. But this game is not like that. Luke and I found ourselves in some places where there was just no hope of surviving. It was amazing. We got attacked by a dragon at one point. A scorch beast,
Yeah.
That's what it was called.
It was like a level 50 dragon just flew up over this mountain we were trying to climb, and we were like, oh, shit, we got to get out of here.
But some random stranger way higher level than us came in and saved my life. Luke didn't make it.
No, I didn't make it. One of the things I am a little concerned about is the fact that the entire map was open, and I know that there's probably going to be some level restricted areas that we weren't able to get to in the beta, but for the most part, like, we kind of went pretty far north, pretty far south. We went to the edge on the east, and we went pretty far west as well. So we covered a lot of ground on the map, and I'm a little concerned that it's like we've seen too much. I kind of wish they would have restricted the geography of the beta.
Yeah. Yeah, this beta has been really weird. I know that their goal actually was, stress testing their servers, and you have to keep people hooked in order to keep them coming back into play. But I'm with you. I wish it had been more restricted. And in fact, there are 2 more sessions left of the beta, but I'm not interested in getting on because I know I want this game. I'm pumped for it, and I don't want to see more than I've seen already.
Doesn't it come out like next Tuesday?
I know it's not far off.
I think it is next Tuesday. It's either next Tuesday or next Friday. It's next week, but yeah.
But there's a beta session tomorrow and Thursday. Well, if you're listening to the recording, today and Thursday.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but I'm done. I found a boxing glove with spikes in it. I like punching things in that game. It's fantastic. So you've kind of expressed your gripe, but I have a question. Are there any changes that you hope they actually make to the game before it comes out? I know we're kind of down to the wire on whether they can or not, but if they do, what would you like to see?
Well, and I think we understand that this is a living game and that there's going to be a lot of quality of life changes that come throughout it as well. Like what we play on release day isn't what this game's going to be 6 months from release day. This is just not the nature of those kind of games. But I don't know. My gripes with it are systemic, and I don't think they are things that will necessarily be able to change. There was a lot of like weird quest sequencing where it was like, hey, go here to get your directions to go to this place, but then you got to come back to say that you did it and get the next thing. And a lot of bouncing back and forth, point A to point B to point A to point C to point A to point D. Like, I'm just not about that life, and I don't feel like that's ever been. I don't think that's super common in Bethesda games, and I don't know why it felt so common in what we were doing on Fallout 76. So, but that's more of a structural thing. One thing I didn't get a chance to get into was the base building idea.
Oh yeah,
and
we didn't even mess with that.
Yeah, well, because I was just so interested in looking at the world, and so I'm interested to see how much it improved over Fallout 4 because the base building in Fallout 4 was not fun at all. I did the bare minimum base building I had to do and then never touched it again. And I think that's how, I mean, obviously there's like a set of players who got really hardcore into it and built really crazy things. Were you into Fallout 4, Cody? Because that game took place in Boston, so.
I liked it. It was very much just more Fallout 3 to me, except in the city I knew. Mm-hmm. That was the reason I bought it. The setting was the reason I bought it.
Gosh, now they just need to make one in South Central Virginia, and we'll all three have a Fallout game.
Maybe it'll be DLC for 76.
No, everything south of Charleston is just ash. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah, but as my friend Sam pointed out, the map's not quite accurate.
It never is.
You can go to you can go to places north of Charleston that should be in the ash heap south of Charleston.
Well, and also just the fact that it was an ash heap before the nukes were launched too. So, one thing that I think would be cool, and maybe this is more of a like a custom server idea. I think there's so much cool potential if they were to release private servers that you can make. But
yes.
One of the really cool things about the game is that Larry and I can be partied up together in the same world, but we don't have to be doing the same things. And proximity chat's a really cool thing, but if you're in a team with each other, you being able to hear each other isn't dependent on your proximity to one another. It would be cool to have a more realistic server where like I send you like we kind of have jobs and we have to go out and gather this supply or kill this thing, but we can only talk to the people who are in our group with us, like within proximity of us. So if you go to the south of the map to find the Mothman and I go north to find a bunch of loose screws to craft stuff, we have to communicate like via our Pit Boys or something like that. Like I think there's some cool potential in private servers to do more survival-esque things.
Yeah. I agree with that. The base building, you haven't tried it, and I didn't play Fallout 4, so I don't know. I know I'm kind of doubling back to something you said already.
You're fine.
But
I knew you had a chance to mess with it where I didn't. So
yeah, I enjoyed what I got to do of it. I never like amassed enough money to because you have to spend money on the pieces of your base, and I never amassed enough money to really do much. My base consists of 4 wooden platforms with a couple of things on top of them. Mm-hmm. But it's in a beautiful position on a rock outcropping overlooking the New River Gorge. So I found a great place to live.
Have they announced how many people are on a server at one time?
I haven't seen if they have. But and this actually gets into one thing that I hope they change. But you can zoom out and look at the map, and you see a little dot where every single person on that server is at. And not only that, but you can see who that person is and what level they are. And I would like them to make that a little more anonymous. I think I'm okay with knowing where people are, but I don't want to be able to know exactly who is where if I'm not teamed up with them. Because if I try to murder you and run away, I don't want you to be able to easily find me. It's purely selfish.
Well, and it's a survival game. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. But I derailed myself. What'd you talk about after base building? Private servers, custom servers. Yeah, I'm with you. I love that idea. It just provides a whole... And especially if they add mods to this game, which I don't know if you saw, but people have already begun modding this on PC.
Of course.
So adding some mods in, this game just has so much potential to be something really unique in the current gaming landscape, I think.
You can have a whole different kind of random encounter with the Scorch Beast.
Oh my gosh.
Another thing I would like to see changed is, from what it looks like, is there's 4 people allowed per group, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, it'd be cool to build communities of people, and I think one thing that's going to make the map interesting is kind of living, in the sense of people will be able to build bases, and I imagine people are going to build some ridiculously huge, like, compounds, and just the idea of like, all right, we're going to send some scout teams this way to figure out if there's anyone we want to raid. And like, that's another thing that's like, if they add anonymity to the map and you don't appear on it, like there's more potential for those kinds of things where there's a collaborative effort to steal supplies from different organized groups of players and stuff.
Yeah. And one workaround on that I want to test out, I don't know if it'll work or not, but when you join somebody in the game, you join their server, but you don't automatically join their team. I wonder if that leaves the door open to where you could kind of just make your way onto the same server, even if you have too many to actually technically squad up. I wonder if you could run like 8, 12 deep.
Yeah, I think the likelihood of that would be slim, but that's where private servers or custom servers at least get into it, where it's like 8 of us can join and we'll have the proximity chat, but then it can fill up with randoms as well, and we set parameters and rules, and it's searchable.
Yeah. But, I mean, you've hit everything that, as far as changes I hope they make to the game, that's about it. The only other thing I'm concerned about is some of the events seem a little wonky, like they're not quite working right. Like we stumbled into one where you were killing wave after wave of an enemy called Scorched, and like we eliminated the first wave, and then figured the event had glitched out or something because the second wave never came, and it felt like 10 minutes later the second wave shows up.
Yeah, it was a while, and I think it's because there was like one randomly spawned Scorched that was somewhere else within our little area of the map, and we didn't find him until way later.
Yeah, but other than that, I've really enjoyed it, and it seems like the game's pretty well put together, and I look forward to the full release.
All right,
and that's all I've got to say about that.
Codsworth,
What's up?
Welcome back. I'm so sorry.
No worries. It's interesting.
your topic. What do you got for us this week?
Yes. I'd like to talk about The Witcher, but not the super successful gaming series or the nerdy ass books, but the Netflix series that is going to be coming out at some point. I don't think they've announced a release date or a release window. Yeah, obviously I'm not sure the series got off on the right start. It was kind of questioned from the beginning when Henry Cavill, aka Superman, was cast as Geralt. That kind of got a mixed response from the audience, although there were a healthy amount of people who were like, all right, this is cool. And the reason we're talking about this now is that the showrunners decided to release a very early screen test of Henry Cavill as Geralt. And I guess to say the reactions to the footage are mixed would be an understatement, or maybe an overstatement. He essentially looks like a silver-haired Legolas with a cleft chin and a worse wig. Some people have drawn comparisons to Sephiroth from Final Fantasy, or like a hair metal band guitarist, or whatever you want to say. Henry Cavill's been getting it a lot recently. He just has bad luck with hair.
After Mustache Gate.
Yeah, after Mustache Gate, now there's this.
I was most uncomfortable about being able to see his actual lip in the screen test. I just wasn't used to that.
It was a bit disturbing. And so I don't really want to talk about this in light of whether or not the footage looks good, because it's just really early. It's a very early screen test that probably should not have been released. I do want to talk about this kind of in a more general sense about video game adaptations. And this is definitely not a topic that I was aiming to talk about last week when Castlevania launched. So kind of starting off, I'd like to...
Hey, before we jump into that, not to cut you off, but I do want to stay on The Witcher for a second, because
Sure.
I'm curious, does their handling of that release and kind of just the overall sentiment around Cavill being cast as Geralt, does it make you kind of worry about how they are handling the franchise already, in the sense of just like Geralt is a fixture within a context, like to me, Geralt, yeah, he's an interesting character, but he's interesting because the world he's in props him up as interesting, right?
And the characters around him are fascinating.
And so just to like release a screen test of him in a black room, it's just like, not to make a judgment about the quality of the series in general, but just from the people who are running the production, it just makes it seem like they don't have a real firm grasp on what makes The Witcher The Witcher. Like, it's not Geralt, it's the world at large.
I don't think it's enough to give me pause, and I don't think it should give other people pause. There's been plenty of other evidence based on what the showrunner has said that she does understand kind of the core of the series, and it's interesting too, because the series is based off of the books, not the games. Mm-hmm. Which I haven't read any of the books, so I'm much more unfamiliar with that, and I understand that the series is starting very early in Geralt's career. I do question the decision to release this. I don't think it's given me enough pause to like reconsider my thoughts about the series as a whole. I'm waiting to reserve judgment. I'm not a huge Henry Cavill fan, so that was a little bit disappointing, but I think you're right. I've never really thought about The Witcher as like all about Geralt. Geralt is he's definitely an interesting character, but I find the characters around him, and you're right, the world around him, much more fascinating. And so I'll be more interested to see how they deal with that. And based on everything the showrunner says, she definitely understands at least the tone of the world, which I think is the most important thing.
Yeah, the conversation around it has just been kind of funny from different podcasts and stuff I've listened to, like, because they're like, how can you release this footage because he is The Witcher, and this doesn't show him it's not a great showing. And to me, it's like, well, you don't understand it either, because The Witcher is used as like a pejorative term in the game when referring to Geralt, like, because Geralt isn't the Witcher, he is a Witcher, and he's like a part of this rich history of his kind. And when you hear somebody refer to him as the Witcher in the game, like, it's a pejorative term. And so the reaction to it's been kind of funny, but to me it's just like Geralt doesn't sell it to me. I'm sorry, Cavill doesn't sell Geralt to me, and this didn't do me any favors either.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think it's definitely it's part of a larger conversation about the quality of video game adaptations we've gotten in the past, and that's kind of where I want to take this conversation. We're unsure how this will turn out, but in the past, it's well known and well documented that video game adaptations have not been the finest pieces of cinema that have graced our screens.
Except that rare gem, Super Mario Brothers.
Yes, and Street Fighter, as Luke made clear to me.
That was Mortal Kombat.
Sorry, Mortal Kombat. It's all the same.
Basically the same game. Just kidding. Now all the fighting game guys are going to come after us.
But yeah, I kind of want to get your guys' temperatures on what are your thoughts on video game adaptations in general. Do you actually have a favorite adaptation out there as of now?
So in general, I'm always hesitant when one's coming out just because of the rich history of horrible movies. But I am also someone who enjoys watching bad movies. I've really enjoyed Sharknado. And so like I enjoy watching the Mario Brothers movie because it's terrible. But I think there have been a few adaptations that have been handled well. I responded to you guys maybe it was you guys. It might have been someone else in a sort of joking way with about adaptations with the Prince of Persia, the Disney movie. But I actually, it's not my favorite movie of all time, but I actually enjoyed that movie. I didn't think it was bad. That actually may be my favorite video game adaptation movie. I see your judgment. It's all over your face, Cody. You can't even hide it.
Is there a specific reason that you enjoyed that more than the others? I'm curious.
I think that I'm blinded by nostalgia. For the Prince of Persia trilogy was just so it was such a big deal for me when I was a teenager, and so for me it was just like a fun little adventure movie rooted in something that had a lot of nostalgia for me.
How about you, Luke?
Yeah, I don't.
Also, Jake Gyllenhaal's real attractive.
It's a fact. That's a fact.
No, I don't have a favorite video game adaptation. I tend to shy away from gaming adaptations just because I think gaming is such a different medium than any other form of entertainment, and that agency is such an important part of it that I think you rip that away from some of these characters and you lose what makes them them. And so I'm trying to even think of I'm not a huge movie watcher in general. I'm trying to even think of a video game adaptation other than the awesome Mortal Kombat movies from back in the day that I've watched, and I can't really think of any. I know one of yours is going to be Castlevania. I'm interested because you said high quality adaptations, and I'm trying to think of what else you have in mind here. Maybe the Tomb Raider movie.
No, I mean,
I'm kind of in the same boat here. I'm picking Prince of Persia because the bar's pretty low.
yeah, and I think that's the overall sentiment. I would obviously say Castlevania. And I think I kind of want to delve into why so many of these fail, but I think the reason that Castlevania succeeded was, one, it was afforded the time to tell its story because it's a television series. I think that's a large part of the reason it succeeded, but also because it was based on a franchise that I don't know. It's not a super. It doesn't have a lot of narrative depth to it. I mean, there is definitely a universe and people are into it, but I think a large group of people who played those games are just like, oh, it's a cool vampire slaying game and the gameplay is great. And so they kind of had a much over a blank canvas to draw from and to kind of paint on and tell the story they wanted to tell without fear of pissing off too many fans, as long as they include Dracula and a couple of other interesting characters and kind of make them well-written and well-drawn characters, they'll succeed. And so I definitely say Castlevania is the best video game adaptation that's ever been made. But again, the bar isn't that high. Even when that bar is not that high, Castlevania is still pretty great. And I think it's interesting to me because we're starting to see like a rise in not so much demand, but definitely a rise in the amount of projects like that are in development. There's the Witcher series. Showtime is going to do a Halo series. Castlevania, Netflix is obviously doing their Castlevania thing. And so there's definitely corporate executives are definitely interested in monetizing these franchises, and for good reason, because they draw in a lot of money. I am curious, why do you guys think that so many of these, even with the budget they have, so many of these big budget adaptations fail? Is there a reason that they failed? What approach are these people taking that just makes them a hot pile of stinking garbage?
I think that video games being adapted into movies often fail for the same reason that movies adapted into video games fail. And that's, we just put all the stock into name recognition. Oh, Mortal Kombat's huge right now. If we put a movie out, it's going to sell. And that's all I shouldn't say that's all anyone's interested in. But enough people have control over what's happening who that's all they're interested in, that it kind of overshadows what could maybe be a really good thing.
Yeah, and again, the agency thing I think is an important part, like stepping in and I'm going to say this. I don't necessarily feel like this when I'm playing games, but a lot of people say it, like that idea of stepping in and feeling like the character that you're playing as. Like you don't get that same thing when you're seeing it on the screen. And also just like I think the reason a Castlevania animated series works better than would that same script work if it was a Castlevania live action series?
So definitely some elements of it, but it gives it freedom to. The action is where the animation shines the most, and that's the reason it succeeds for a lot of people.
Right, and so I think that's another big reason that a lot of video game movie adaptations don't work, because they try to rip them out, make them live action, and then you enter into this weird uncanny valley with the characters that who you're used to seeing 3D renderings of, and they can do all this awesome action-oriented stuff, and then it just gets ripped out, and it's like, oh, it's just special effects, and it loses its feel. So I think those are two of the big things. And then in movies in particular, it's just a lot of times you're taking a 12-hour game and trying to jam it into an hour-and-a-half long movie, and it's just like, that doesn't work. I think the only time these things really succeed are when it's either they have the time to let their stories kind of flesh out, and then or when they tell a story that's that's in universe but outside of the main line.
Yeah, I do want to circle back around to this idea of kind of affording these stories the room to breathe. But one thing I do want to mention is, as a reason that a lot of these things fail, at least in my opinion, is I'm going to try to think of the best way to say this. I guess it's a combination of what both of you guys are saying, but like there's a fundamental misunderstanding of why people are drawn to these things. The story of the Tomb Raider movie that came out earlier this year is essentially the same, pretty much beat for beat, as the rebooted whatever 2012 or 2013 version. The reason that game was so great was that it was interactive, and it took a lot of, like Uncharted, it took a lot of these like action movie tropes and made it interactive so that you were the one initiating it. The story of Tomb Raider and the story of Uncharted aren't revolutionary. The reason that they're so great is because you experience them over like 12 hours, but also because you are taking part in an action sequence. The action sequences in the Tomb Raider movie were, a lot of them, taken straight out of the game. But once you strip it of interactivity, it becomes just another kind of bland action scene. And so I think I agree with what you're saying, Luke. There's definitely something lost in the transition from an interactive medium to a quote-unquote passive medium. And I think a lot of times the games we love so much for their narratives, as much as I will play up some of the great narratives in games, I think a lot of the heft and the power of those narratives are the fact that you are taking part in it. I don't know if seen purely from the outside that those narratives are like great on their own. But I kind of do want to circle back around to this idea of giving these stories a room to breathe. Do you guys think that that video game adaptations are perhaps more suited to television. And it'll be interesting to see how this conversation tracks once The Witcher is out and once Halo is out. Obviously, Castlevania is already out. Do you think it's better suited to a long-form medium like television?
It really depends on the game, I think. So with something like Halo, you've got this vast world, and now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm even changing my mind on this. But because with Halo, you could go one of two ways. If you're going to tell the Master Chief story, you're going to need several movies to do that, at least, or a TV series would be cool. And there are various stories within that universe that you could tell television-wise. But there are also one-offs you could do in the universe. And we've actually got a few examples. Have you guys seen the Forward Unto Dawn movie from Halo?
No.
It's a Halo movie. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. And Halo 5, if you were willing to go into the Waypoint app, it came with a one-off TV series about John Locke. And I couldn't get into that. But so that universe lends itself either way. Something like Castlevania, some big drawn out. I haven't played Castlevania. There's a lot of freedom there. Let me not talk on things I don't know. But I thought of another video game movie I really like, Silent Hill. You guys ever watch that?
Yeah.
Like that's something in the horror vein. I think has to be a little more concise. The most you could really draw it out to would be short miniseries for the reasons we've talked about horror not working. Once you get too familiar with it, it's not scary. So like the first Resident Evil game or movie, for example, wasn't terrible, but I feel like it got more terrible the further that series went. So yeah, for me, it just depends on the nature of the game, the story in the game. It could go either way.
Yeah, I prefer TVs to movie regardless of where the story is coming from. If it's video games or if it's just, especially if it's anything character driven, you know, I think the amount of character development that can take place over a 10 episode season is far greater than the amount of natural character development that can happen in an hour and a half to 2 hour long movie without making incredible leaps in the story that you're telling. Not like unrealistic leaps, but just you get what I'm saying. So, and I think generally when you're talking about video game adaptations, you're adapting stories that have iconic characters at the center of them. You're talking about, all the time they're talking about Uncharted movies or the Tomb Raider series or, Castlevania. Well, Castlevania is a little more probably oriented to the action than it is the characters, but The Witcher, it is about the Witcher, Geralt, the only one. And so I think a TV series is better suited to exploring those characters in their full capacity and letting them grow.
Yeah, I think also the oftentimes limited budget of a TV show can actually be a huge boon for something like this that would ordinarily kind of like Warcraft, where it's just an effects extravaganza. It sometimes forces showrunners to be a little bit more creative in how they're telling the story. Obviously, there have been plenty of big budget television shows, Game of Thrones being probably the most significant one. But I think limiting yourself or being forced to limit yourself can kind of be a huge boon to the writing staff. It forces them to zero in on character a little bit more than action sometimes. And so I hope that's the direction that The Witcher goes in. I could easily see it being the direction the Halo series goes in, although apparently the budget on that is fucking astronomical. So, yeah, I think going back to what you said, Luke, I think understanding the world is probably more important than getting at a character, and maybe telling stories off the path of a narrative we already know is probably a better approach. I think the worlds of a lot of these games are much more interesting than maybe the main character, at least in the case of Halo. And so I think it's definitely a worthwhile endeavor to like zero in on the world and tell an interesting story within an interesting world, and maybe retell the story we've already heard or already seen. And so I guess I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts, but I do want to close on a kind of a mental exercise or a game, if you will.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. If you could adapt any game into a TV show or a movie, it's up to you which one you want to do. What would it be, and how would you choose to adapt it? What story would you choose to tell based on that game?
So mine would be the Prince of Persia. But
Go
do
for
it
a
better.
second try.
Yeah. You still hire Jake Gyllenhaal because he's perfect for the role.
10 years later.
I know he's gotten a little older, but it could still work. If we can CGI Henry Cavill's mustache off his face, we can make Jake Gyllenhaal look 10 years younger. Anyway, but no, with the Disney adaptation of Prince of Persia, they just got that was a case of taking too many liberties with the story. Like the Prince of Persia, that trilogy on the original Xbox generation, it remains probably my favorite video game story that's been told. That trilogy, I would love to see that trilogy adapted into a trilogy of movies that sticks pretty close to how the story is told in the game. And I know you've got to do some things different to fill up time, because you can't just have a dude parkouring and killing sand creatures for an hour and a half. Or can you? Have you ever seen The Expendables? There's no story there. It's just killing, right? Anyway. But I would just like to, I would love to see that story done well and told truly. And I think that's part of what makes these game movies fail also, is just, you have to do one of two things. You either have to go off the beaten path and tell like a separate sort of story in universe, or you have to be true to the actual story of the game. And I don't know if that's ever been done really well.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, my answer is just that I wouldn't. I wouldn't, because I just don't think. I don't think a TV series can do the games that I love the most justice. Like everybody's like, man, The Last of Us, that would make a great movie. And it's like, it wouldn't, because throughout the game, you feel the weight of the decisions that you're making as Joel. And and again, it's a story that takes 10, 12 hours to tell. And there's no game that I can think of that I'm like, man, I would really love to passively experience this universe, because a video game is just the perfect way to explore a world, to feel the decisions that you're making as a character, and to grow alongside it. Like the fact that I can't think of a single movie adaptation from a game that excites me makes it difficult to think of a game I would like to give that treatment to. Because even if I had full control over it, I still don't think there's a way to capture the essence of what makes those games so lovable for me. The only thing I can really think of is something that's like What Remains of Edith Finch, and because I think that had a lot of qualities that would make a TV series really cool, where each family member's story is told in a completely different style.
Yeah, it's like an anthology series.
Yeah, and I think that idea is really cool. And that's one that, like Larry said, that I think you'd have to stick really, really close. Because, I mean, it's essentially a TV show that you move the thumbstick forward on. But, I love the idea of what Netflix is doing with some of, like, the interactive series that it's creating, and kind of making maybe a ABC choice of, like, hey, choose this path or whatever, but still adding some of those elements to it, where like an old Goosebumps Choose Your Own Adventure kind of book.
Those books were so good.
And so I think there's probably some walking simulators that I'm like, this would be cool. Like Oxenfree would make a cool little animated series, but it's because those games are so close to it already, you know. But
Yeah.
they have really great characters, really great dialogue, really great presentation.
I think I would tend to stray towards your answer, Luke. I would never want to adapt any of the games that I love. So instead, I'll choose to adapt a game series that I've always been, I mean, that I like, but that I really could give two shits about the narrative from. And I'm going to go with Zelda. And I'm going to go with making it into a silent black and white movie. I think you could do it. I actually think you could do a not a cool or a great, but definitely an interesting version of The Legend of Zelda that is kind of like a silent black and white samurai film. And I definitely wouldn't want this to be live action. I think it would be cool to make it animated.
A silent black and white animated
I think,
samurai film.
Dude,
I love it.
any live action version of Link will come out looking fucking dumb. That costume is just not meant to be worn by a live action person. So I'll say in jest that that's my answer, but I think I would if that popped up on my Netflix queue, I would 100% watch it.
Why would you build on perfection, though? There's already a Legend of Zelda animated series.
No,
It's just fantastic.
I'm in denial.
All right.
Real quick, before you move on to your topic, Luke, I looked it up. There is an actual Mothman museum.
Nice.
Oh, really?
In Point Pleasant.
In Point Pleasant, and they actually captured the storefront pretty faithfully.
Oh, yeah, they did. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. I wonder what's behind that big locked metal door in the actual game.
Rather than learn to pick locks in the game, I'm going to go kick it in real life. It's probably going to be accurate.
All right, guys, let's move on. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this Diablo controversy. So, give you guys
I don't know what you're talking about.
Give you guys a quick little rundown for all the gaming fans out there that have been hiding under a rock. So, there was a little convention called BlizzCon this weekend where Blizzard gets everybody together and says we're going to make some announcements. One of those announcements came during a Diablo panel where they were talking about the future of the Diablo series, and they announced Diablo Immortal, a Diablo experience for mobile users, and it got the reception that I think you can expect any announcement like this to get, which was boos and hisses and anger. And during the Q&A session, a man whose name I don't know, I'm sure it's been released, but it doesn't matter, got up and asked the developer the question, is this just some sort of misplaced April Fool's joke? To which the developer kind of reeled. Apparently he lied to a screener to ask the question. The screener, he told the screener he was going to ask what the inspiration behind the game was. Not getting quite as much play as this guy because I feel like it was a little more measured. Is another guy stood up and said, hey, there's some features. And I guess a good place to start here is just where are we on the Diablo series? For me, I've never played the Diablo games. I'm not really much of like a loot crawler. So it's never been something that spoke to me, but where are you guys at?
I've never played one, so yeah.
I played Diablo 3. Not a lot, but I enjoyed it for what it was. It was definitely a game I liked playing with my friends more than I liked playing by myself.
Yeah. So a guy got up, and the response has gotten more play than the actual question. I thought the question was okay. He said, there seems to be some features in Diablo Immortal that we've really been asking for in Diablo 3. And for those that don't remember, like Diablo 3 actually had kind of a checkered start, and had to undergo kind of a Destiny 1 treatment in the sense of just probably even more of an overhaul than Destiny 1, just in the sense of updates and changes to the way that the game plays in order to get it to a place where it is beloved. But this guy said, there's a lot of features in Immortal that we've been asking for in Diablo 3. So is there really no plan to ever bring this game over from mobile to PC? And that's when we got the soundbite of the developer said, no, it's going to be fully on mobile. And then the crowd booed. And that's when the developer yelled, "You mean you guys don't have phones?" Which is played well. So I want to kind of, here's what I don't want to talk about in this. Because I think we're just going to all three agree and say the same thing. I don't want to talk about the shitty people that like hop online after these things and like send death threats to people and all that, because we all agree like those people are pieces of shit and they don't deserve the platform that they don't deserve any more of a megaphone than they think they already have. So, but I do want to talk about kind of what happened at this convention, your thoughts on it, from both Blizzard's perspective and the fans' perspective and these question askers' perspectives, and kind of talk there for a second, and then we can kind of broaden the discussion from there. But just general thoughts on what happened at the convention to start.
Well, obviously the guy who lied about his question and was very sarcastic in what he was asking, that wasn't the way to go about it. And then the crowd obviously wasn't feeling it either. And it sucks to get booed and for people to not be excited about this thing you've made. But the response just was not wise. and I get it. I work with teenagers, and teenagers just suck a lot of the time. and Luke can attest to this. Back at the beginning of my career, I didn't have a lot of patience, and I would just break rebellious teenagers to the best of my ability and be done with them. But when you're harsh with people, there's a cost. And although the people at Blizzard have vastly different jobs than I do, it sucks when people don't react the way you want them to. But being harsh with them is not going to put you in any better position than the one that you found yourself in. You're just going to dig that hole deeper.
I definitely think there's things that could have been done better on both sides. I definitely think the comment from the developer was extremely tone deaf. Like, you have to know the room that you're talking to. He didn't read the room very well. And it was definitely, it was a moment of probably consternation, and he was overwhelmed by the negative response from the crowd. At the same time, I also think this whole thing is kind of like a weird, like, it's the crossroads of like expectations, passion, and like the specific event that this is. And I think for fans coming in, this is like the most hardcore. These are the most hardcore Blizzard fans and the most hardcore Diablo fans you could possibly get. And for Blizzard to only announce a mobile Diablo title and not in any way hint at some sort of Diablo 4, which is clearly inevitable at this point, is kind of weird. And I don't want to, like, we were talking before, Luke, about Jason Schreier's little piece that he put up today about how, at least according to sources that he talked to, Blizzard pulled a little Diablo 4 teaser like at the last moment. They decided not to show it. I don't know if that's true, and I don't want to assume that it's true. But that would explain the situation they got themselves in, which is very un-Blizzard like.
Well, they would have had to have made that decision more than a couple weeks ago, because on October, middle of October, like October 17th, they announced like, hey, don't expect Diablo 4 news at this thing.
And they also said they're working on multiple Diablo projects,
right,
which at this point is pretty clear what that means. I don't know. I'll talk more about my thoughts on the fans' reactions after you talk, though. I'd rather let you go ahead.
Yeah, from an event standpoint, I think that in just taking the lead up into the event as well, I put a ton of the blame here on Blizzard. Blizzard had been talking for quite some time that like, hey, this is going to be a big year for Diablo. You know, we got a lot of things in the work for Diablo, and naturally, like, the fan base is going to think, oh, that means Diablo 4 news. It's been 6 years since we've gotten a new mainline Diablo, and it wasn't just the fan base. You know, there was also gaming outlets that were kind of jumping on that bandwagon as well, and writing article. You know, Forbes put out an article basically that Diablo 4 at BlizzCon was going to be inevitable. Polygon posted some speculation about Diablo 4. GameSpot posted some speculation about Diablo 4. Like, so there was this hype that was accruing through gaming outlets and through fan bases, and whether that, you know, you can argue what you will about the gaming outlets doing that just because they wanted the fan base to click in and read or what have you. But the fact of the matter was that there was a sense of expectation for months leading up to BlizzCon. And, you know, Blizzard obviously wants to sell tickets to their event, and there was a long opportunity before October 17th for them to clear the air about what to expect. But like looking into Blizzard's like refund policies for their convention, you know, they're non-refundable. Like once you purchase a ticket, you can't refund it. And people aren't attending these events, you know, a couple days out. This is like months of planning. You got to get your plane ticket. You got to get your hotel. You got to ask off for time, your time for work or whatever. And, you know, so Diablo fans probably were making plans to attend BlizzCon with this expectation that was in the air. And then for them to announce just 2 weeks out, like, hey, no Diablo 4 news is going to be here. I just find that kind of shitty. Like, I'm always going to stand up for the consumer. Like, that's always going to be kind of where my allegiances lie, because at the end of the day, we don't have a ton of control over it. And I just thought it was pretty scummy for Blizzard to try to have their cake and eat it too with some of the hype they drummed up around this being a huge year for Diablo. So I can see in the moment there why fans would be frustrated and disappointed by the announcement that came, even with a 2-week heads up that there wasn't going to be Diablo 4 news at BlizzCon. So, and like you said, Cody, this is the equivalent of like, to bring it back down into kind of terms we would understand. It'd be like Naughty Dog saying, hey, this year's going to be a really big year for Uncharted. And then we all buy tickets to PSX and go, and they're like, we partnered with the developers of Temple Run to bring an Uncharted Infinite Runner to iOS. Like, you know, and look, obviously a metaphor breaks down at some point, and this is more of a fully featured Diablo game on mobile than a Infinite Runner. But point being, like, we would feel disappointed in that as well, because that's something that we feel attached to and love, and to have the excitement that you feel about that franchise kind of exploited, I would feel disappointed by that as well. So do I think that standing up and being like, is this an early April Fool's Day joke was the right way to do it? No.
It's not even a sick burn.
Yeah, it's not even a sick burn. I just, and the whole idea of just, and the fact that this dude's just being touted as a hero and stuff is super shitty also. But like, but the dude that did stand up and say like, hey, there's a lot of features here we've been asking for in Diablo 3. Like, is there any chance that we're going to get to, like, I feel like that's a valid question.
I do to a certain extent. Like, I can understand being disappointed in the moment, but also with the knowledge that like Diablo 4 is coming down the road. Mm-hmm. Like, this game, if you're the Diablo player at BlizzCon, maybe this game isn't for you, but you don't have to play it. Like, it's not. I understand. I totally agree with like feeling like you've been taken advantage of, like your fandom has been taken advantage of, but also like there are plenty of people are still playing Diablo 3. Diablo 3 is a sustainable game you can continue playing, and Diablo 4 is on the horizon, and it's more and more certain that it is on the horizon. just because one of these experiences isn't for you, I don't think it totally gives you the license to like start berating the developers who, by the way, other than the guy who was on stage who definitely didn't react well, I feel bad for the developers of this game because I'm sure they've been pouring their heart and soul into this thing. And I'm sure it's going to be, I haven't played it and I probably won't play it. I've seen footage of it, but it looks like a fully fledged Diablo title on mobile, which is kind of cool.
Go ahead.
I think it would be a cool thing to drop without hyping Diablo though. Like that,
Yeah.
for me, that's where the big misstep was made. And at best it was and I know the developers didn't have a whole lot of say in this probably. This was someone else, like someone in marketing made this call, you know. But at best it was a really tone deaf move. Like think back to how the Counter-Strike mobile game was received, you know. Like they should have seen how this was going to go. Like there are going to be a lot of Diablo people who weren't excited about it. But to hype it like that was not a good move. And at worst, somebody was trying to, you know, string people along to buy tickets. And I'm not going to presume which intention it was, but it wasn't a good move. And I totally get it's not for you maybe, and that's fine. And I think that flies if you don't hype it months in advance and then only let people know a couple weeks out to temper their expectations.
And just the fact that we've had so many of these, not so many, we've had good examples of of things like this being handled well, where it's like, hey, there's multiple projects in the works. This one that people aren't going to quite be that excited about is closer than the one that people are going to be really excited about. But we're going to announce them in kind of conjunction with each other. And Bethesda has two really great examples of this when they announced Fallout Shelter and then announced Fallout 4. And then when they put the Elder Scrolls, is it the Elder Scrolls Blades?
Yeah.
What a shitty name. That just sounds like a mobile game. You know,
The Blades are a faction within the world.
and you know what satiated the Elder Scrolls?
Lore master.
And you know what satiated the Elder Scrolls fans that were waiting for the Elder Scrolls 6? A fucking 20-second teaser where we saw a mountain. You know? And it satiated everybody. Like, hey, Diablo 4, you probably have a mountain you can zoom out from. And just appease everybody. Like, and then the story becomes like, hey, they announced Diablo 4. There was no release date on it. It's probably not even going to be on this generation of consoles or whatever. But hey, they announced it. You know, like, and then it just that short move makes it feel like you didn't take advantage of your fan base to get them all in a room to tell them about something that they don't want to have. Because that's the rub for me. It's just like, you knew your audience here. You knew them. Like, you knew you're getting your most hardcore PC fans, people who, like, they're fucking $3,000 machines in their room. They've been playing Diablo 3 since the day it released. Like, you knew who was attending this event. And to not even try to give them something that made the trip worth the while is scummy to me.
It's bad event planning for sure. I don't want to come off like I'm apologizing for what Blizzard did, because I do think I think it was just poor planning and definitely tone deaf in a lot of ways. I'm more just coming at it from the angle that, like, there are plenty of franchises that I love that have, like, either side products or projects that I'm just totally uninterested in. Granted, they weren't announced in this way, which I think we can all agree is probably the worst part of this whole thing. But, like, I'm just tired of the jump from disappointment to, like, pure bitterness and toxicity being so fast. Granted, it's the nature of a kind of event like this. Like you're saying, it's the most hardcore of the hardcore, but, like, I'm just tired of that jump. And I think
can you define what you mean by the toxicity of it real quick? Because I think there's a spectrum here.
Yeah, there's definitely a spectrum. I think there are plenty of people that I saw, either like friends I had who went to the event, or like people online who were reacting like, okay, like I'm totally not into this. And that was like the extent of their disappointment. And then we have the people who are giving death threats. I don't really want to talk about them because they're not worth my time. But they're then the people who are just like, this has been their sole. I don't even know how they're enjoying BlizzCon, because it seems like all they're doing is ranting about this one thing on Twitter during their time at BlizzCon. And they're not like they're not threatening the developers, but they're like berating them nonstop on Twitter. And I would hope that they're not berating them in person at the convention, because that's just poor form. But there's a fine line between being disappointed about an announcement like this and being totally bitter about it. And I think there's a spectrum within that, but I'm just like, there's a certain amount of, I'm just sort of fed up with that kind of that evolution and development in terms of response to something like this. Because I think, like, if I was a Diablo fan, and maybe I'm definitely more even tempered than probably a lot of the people who were at that event, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll probably just leave this convention hall right now and not come back to the Diablo event. But like, Diablo 4 is going to come out at some point. I'll play the hell out of that, no pun intended, and then I'll enjoy my time with it. I don't know. That's just, at least that's the way I'm viewing it. I'm definitely not a Diablo fan, and I'm not as intensely passionate about the franchise as these people are. So take all my words with a grain of salt. But I think there is a fine line between bitterness and disappointment.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I like the gamers rise up shit. I just roll my eyes at.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff. But I do think that there have been times where, and I'm not saying this would be one of them. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to think if this was a franchise that I loved, you know, like if this wasn't Uncharted or, you know, The Last of Us, or like every year I've ever played Madden. You know, I mean, it's taken Madden years and years for me to get to the point of like, enough is enough with this. And I'm kind of vocal about my disappointment in the franchise at this point. But like, I agree that toxicity is not the route to go. But I saw a lot of this whole idea of just like, oh my gosh, gamers are so entitled, you know? But I think it's equally entitled for a developer to think just because they make something that it needs to be received well. And yeah, you may have an audience for it, but if you alienate the audience that placed you in a position to make the thing that you're making now, I think there is a level of deserved backlash. And I'm not saying death threats or berating on Twitter, but this idea of like, oh, there's nobody at these stations playing Diablo Immortal, you know, at BlizzCon. Like,
Yeah.
You know, or the idea of when Battlefront 2 came out, like, there was the controversy there that we're not going to buy it, and we're going to talk about this being exploitative. And look, I don't know enough about NetEase to speak to the nature of the mobile games that they make. I'm not a mobile gamer. I've done some reading that says they make a lot of like pay to win shit, and I don't know if that is the case. I do think that there is more of a, because at that point you're diluting your franchise if you're turning it into a model for a game that if you're taking advantage of a model that takes advantage of players. I do think there is something to be said there that fans should be more vocal about. But I do think it's entitled for developers to have this mindset of just like, well, I made it, be grateful for it. Because like a lot of argument I'm seeing, and this isn't from developers, but like from people that are taking the other side in the Diablo argument, is just like, they could have made nothing. It's like, okay, like, yeah, great. I mean, that's not really a great argument. Like, it's just as entitled to think that just because I took the time to make something, that it means you have to like it.
Yeah, I personally fall on the side that I think there's much more entitlement on the part of consumers, at least in this. I won't even say just in video games. At least in terms of the big franchises, there's a lot of entitlement. I don't think that either developers or fans should take for granted what they have. Developers certainly shouldn't take for granted that they have this massive fan base that is willing to support them in the ways that they are. And I don't think fans should take for granted the things that developers are pouring their heart, blood, sweat, tears, whatever, everything into these games for them. I think both sides should probably come to a common ground and common understanding of that. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of talk about that, and instead it's been one side or the other, which I guess is the nature of Twitter in general.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think with that we have to remind ourselves that there's far more people in the middle. I feel like you and I, we agree on a lot of this, but we also disagree on some of it as well. But like we exist far closer to the middle of this argument.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not like, oh, you know, stupid entitled gamers. They made it. You need to like it. Like I've seen some people say.
No, of course not. Yeah.
And I'm not the guy that's like, yeah, you should be sending Diablo developers death threats on Twitter. Anyway, yeah, I think we kind of can get lost in the internet world because the most extreme examples of people tend to get the attention and the megaphones, and those get blasted out. And I think I saw a lot of the extreme on the one side, and you saw a lot of the extreme on the other side. And I think we're both fed up with the extremes.
Yeah, very much so. I also want to say, like, to the claim that people are saying, like, Blizzard is betraying gamers and like they're betraying all these gamers. You have to think about the fact that the majority of gamers are mobile gamers, and so I feel like there's definitely a concrete reason they're making this game. And I'll actually be curious to see how many of the people who are complaining about it end up playing it anyway.
Well, I mean, again, I think the bigger issue here was how it was announced, not that they made the game. And they could have avoided this whole controversy by not hyping it so far out. Mm-hmm. Because with the Elder Scrolls thing, we saw those announcements together, Luke. And when they announced the mobile game, I was like, really? I'm kind of disappointed after that. But then they showed me that mountain. And it's all I needed.
Also, I've seen a lot of like gaming media people, particularly some IGN people that have been like, you have to remember that gaming is a business and they're making these decisions because of business reasons. And I'm like, okay, I agree. But like there was a lot of vitriol coming during the Battlefront 2 stuff, and that was just a business decision, you know, like anti-consumer decisions are super business oriented. That's all they are. That's why they are anti-consumer.
Yeah.
Like you can't just defend the choices of a publisher or a company because it's just business. Like, because then you can be like, oh man, you can't get mad about slave labor to make Walmart clothing because it's just business. You have to remember they're not making clothes for you. They're making it for them to make money. And it's like,
or all the Rockstar stuff.
You start to paint yourself into a corner with that kind of speak. And I get that we live in a world right now that the toxicity towards developers is so amplified that we want to come to the defense on a regular basis. And I agree. Like there are, in most situations, I want to side with the developers. But when it's something that is anti-consumer, is the way they handled this announcement, like Larry's saying, not the production of the game itself, whatever. I mean, it's not being made by the main Diablo team. It doesn't seem like it's going to be super like pay to win or whatever. But just the way that they kind of took advantage of the fan base to make the announcement is the thing that just rubs me the wrong way. And whether or not the developers are super involved in that conversation, there are advocates at the studio who connect with the publisher and should be having those conversations to protect their fan bases. Then those don't seem to have happened, or didn't seem to have any effect at least.
Agreed.
So, all right. Well, let's take 3 games that people worked really hard on and make fun of them in our next game.
Maybe you'll play one of them this week.
What's that, Larry?
Just an interesting thing that happened this week. Hayden Christensen went to a Comic-Con. He's the guy who played Anakin Skywalker, and this was actually a huge deal. He has avoided these things like the plague because, like many current Star Wars characters, he was basically hated out of wanting to be associated with it. And so I was really glad to see him able to like come and enjoy something that people are finally able to enjoy, because now all the Star Wars fans who are only fans of Star Wars to hate Star Wars have moved on to other things to hate. And those of us who take some joy in the prequel trilogy can now enjoy it with Hayden Christensen. It's beautiful. But this whole conversation kind of reminded me of that. Because Star Wars is another thing where people just get, I mean, in any fandom, you know, you've got those that just berate people over the things that they don't like.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to everybody's favorite game that we play on this podcast every week. There's too many games, but this isn't one of them. You guys know how it works. I'm going to give you 4 games. 3 of them are real. 1 of them is fake. And you guys have to guess which one is fake. If you guess it right, you get a point. If I stump you both, I get a point. Here's the scores. Larry has 3. Cody has 2. I have 2. And I'm going to tie it up this week. Probably not. All right, here we go. You guys ready?
Ready. Yep.
Number 1, Hysteria. Delve deep into the mind of a 17th century housewife ripped from her home during the Swiss witch trials in this first-person narrative adventure game. Learn what it was like to suffer from an undiagnosed mental illness while the world blamed demons. Number 2, The Shape-Shifting Detective. The Shape-Shifting Detective is a supernatural noir murder mystery game where you play as a detective who can shape-shift into other characters, allowing you to unlock secret conversations and private encounters. Number 3, Rage in Peace. Rage in Peace is a story-driven action-adventure game with elements of surprise and memorization. Unravel the last day of Timmy's life as he races against time to get back home and fulfill his sole dream of dying peacefully in his pajamas in the warmth of his home in peace and with no drama.
What a dream.
Number 4, Steel Rats. Steel Rats is a 2.5D dynamic vehicular combat action platformer game. Wreck and ride as a member of a biker gang. Use your motorcycle as a tool of destruction. Make use of a wide arsenal of weapons strapped to your motorbike and be the harbinger of mayhem. All right, Cody, you're going to kick us off here. Here are your 4 options. Hysteria, The Shape-Shifting Detective, Rage in Peace, Steel Rats. What is your guess?
I'd actually want to play Hysteria. Sounds pretty interesting. I'm going to go with Hysteria.
What's that?
I'm going to go with Hysteria.
All right, Larry.
I'm going to go with Rage in Peace.
Like I would ever make a list of 4 that's 4 things long. Cody is right. Hysteria is the made-up game.
Oh.
I figured the Swiss witch trials would throw you off, which was a real thing.
It did. Throw
Yeah,
me
I had
off.
no idea about that.
Switzerland is considered the height of witch torture.
There's only one place that's known for witch trials, and it's in my state.
There's only one thing.
There's only one, and I participated.
I was the trialer.
And as you've probably deduced, I was also the witch.
Projection at its finest. All right, guys, let's get out of here. Larry, who are you? Where can we find you? What are you going to be tweeting about this week?
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at Larry Hunts Zombies. And, I didn't think of anything clever to tweet about. So, like most weeks, I'll just be retweeting political things that make me angry.
All right. Codsworth.
Enjoy.
My name's Cody. I'm at ProElectioneer on Twitter. And I'll probably be staying away from Twitter all of this week.
All right. My name is Luke. You can find me on Twitter at TK4Maniac, and I am just going to be sending menacing pictures of demons to the Diablo developers. It's just fan art.
That's nice.
All right. This is PvA Radio. You can find us on podcast services everywhere. Find us on YouTube. Drop us a follow over on twitch.tv /PvA radio for when we start live streaming here in a couple weeks. If you have questions, want to ask them to us, playerversusall.com /PVAQ. Head over there. Drop us a line. We want to hear from you. But other than that, guys, be good to each other and go vote. We love you.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity is